come to King of the Pond HQ today. I'm going to do a short video on making cork ball pop-ups and how to get them perfect. I've got about 40 to do. It's nice and easy, everything's ready to go. I'm going to show you how to do it. Right, start things simple. I've got a bowl, I put a 1 egg mix in it. I've got a preserved egg in there, which I preserved overnight. It's not essential to use a preserved egg because you can air dry your baits afterwards, but because I make them and then put them into tubs, it's just easier for me to preserve the egg. That way a customer doesn't have a bait go off. But for your own boiling purposes, you don't really need to preserve them. What I've done is I've got a bottle of the flavour, which goes with the Cranberry Enzyme boilies that we're going to be making. This is just a blend of fish enzyme and the actual flavours that go in it. And what I'm going to need to use about 3 ml for a 1 egg mix, which keeps it. It's actually a little bit more flavour than what would actually go in the boilies. But don't forget, when you make a cork ball pop up, you've only got a thin skin that goes around the bait. So if you use too little flavour, then that will dissipate really quickly in the water. So you just want to give it, people like to boost their hook bait, so you want a little bit more flavour in the paste that goes around the cork ball. So I'll be putting 3 ml of that into a 1 egg mix, and then I've got to start adding, after I've beaten the egg soy and beaten the flavour in, I've then got to add the base mix. For this mixing, I need about 3 ml of flavour. So this is a 1 ml syringe. Got 1, 2, 3 ml. Give it a wipe. Smells a bit fresh. And then, excuse the screeching. Make sure it's properly mixed. And then actually the fish enzyme actually changes the structure of the liquid egg, and it goes more viscous than it was before. So you can leave that, let it all absorb the flavour. So the next stage is I need to add the base mix to the mixed up egg and flavour. And what I do is I use a fine sieve to start adding base mix. And what I'm doing with this particular base mix has actually got added egg and added whey gel in the mix itself, which makes the bait go firmer skin, which is what the egg albumin does, and the whey gel makes it go solid throughout the bait. It's 2 very important components if you want to make a boilie that stays together on your hair, or if you tie it on. If you don't use, if you just use the standard base mix, because they're quite a soluble mix, it'll end up falling apart. It won't stay for very long. That's why I always do hard hook baits or cork ball pop-ups. And the other essential thing is I'm actually putting it through a sieve. And the reason I do this is it takes away all the little bits and pieces that might be in the base mix. So like in this case, there's some oyster shell, and when it's a fish meal, it'll all have bits and pieces in it. There's a few nitrous seeds in there as well, which comes from the egg-based bird food that's in the bait. And then what I do is all the spoil that's left over just get put into another tub. And then what we do, once I've got a bit in, start mixing it together. Do a little bit at a time, because you can always put more in, but you can't take any out. That's the most important thing. If it goes too much and it goes too dry, you'll never ever be able to roll your boilies. You need to do your mix a little bit softer than what you normally would do if you're making a normal boilie. So just keep adding a bit at a time. At the moment you can see the consistency. I won't say what it looks like, but you can all tell. And we want to get it to be malleable. You can use it with your hands, so it needs a little bit more powder. Like I said, we just add a little bit at a time. I run my fingers through it just to hurry the process up, but normal sieving works. You need to have a fine sieve like this one as well, not a real big one. But that's the spoil that's left over. It just makes it mostly oyster shell and stuff like that goes in the bait to give it the crunch. The other thing is I always use oyster shell in my bait. I much prefer to use that than I use eggshell, because the problem with using eggshells is they rot. If you ever boil up a load of eggshells and then put them in your fridge for a few days and then go and smell them, you'll never do it again. They stink. And it's exactly the same thing in your bait. You put it in your bait and they just rot in your bait. They're not made for sitting in a boilie, so just to be honest with you, I don't do it. So I've never been an advocate of putting eggshell in my bait, despite what some people say. I don't agree with it. Right, I've got to this stage now where it's a soft piece of paste, but it's actually too soft. It's too hard to mix it with a fork, so you've got to do the rest by hand. At the moment it is very, very sticky still. I mean, that's no good for rolling into a boilie, because you're going to do it, it's going to stick to your hands and you're going to make a right mess. but it's very important that you get it right, because if you do it not quick enough, if you do it too dry, what will happen is, and you don't work quick enough, your boilies will just fall apart on the roller because they won't stick to the cork ball. So you have to have it at the perfect stage, and you literally get about 5 minutes, which is exactly why I use a one egg mix at a time, and I don't make any more. Anyway, that one there, it's still dry, so it's going to need a little bit more. We'll continue using the sieve, put a little bit through, but again, remember, you only need a little tiny bit at a time, because as soon as you put too much in, it will go wrong. Give it a coating like that, and then just keep rolling it round in your hands, kneading it like you would a bit of pastry. I'd say now that's about perfect. Nothing sticking to my hands. It's still doughy enough to work with, but it's not too dry that it's going to fall apart. You'll know if it's too dry because you go like that and it won't, it'll just break. So at the moment it's all sticking together, it's very doughy. This is absolutely perfect. So I've got to work quickly now. I've got about 5 minutes before this is going to have to go in the bin. I'm going to have to start again. I've gunned out by hand with a hand extruder gun because we're only doing small amounts. I've put that out onto the roller. I've done a 12mm sausage, which is on a 16mm table, which is going to have a 12mm cork ball in it. If I was going to be using a smaller cork ball, I'd use a larger sausage for a 16mm boilie, and then you can work things out around it. But for the time being, 12mm sausage, 12mm cork ball should make us a perfect 16mm boilie. One of the barrels that I've just rolled, squash it between your thumb and your middle finger, put your cork ball inside it, wrap the paste around the cork ball, do it gently. If you press too hard, it will all just stick to your fingers and not to the cork ball. So you've got it there, it's an odd shape. If you want to use odd shapes, don't even worry about to roll it, but then all I do is I roll it by hand, get it to be a fairly decent circle, and then drop it in the roller. Again, push it into your thumb and forefinger, gently mould it around the cork ball until it's all covered and there's no gaps, and then give it a good roll. It's actually quite important to try and get your cork ball in the centre of the boilie, and there's a very good reason for this. Is when you boil it, there'd always be the most buoyant part of the bait, and if you've only got a thin skin around the top, I've seen people do it before and they've dropped that into the water and they haven't stirred it, they've just let it boil, and the top of the boilie hasn't been submerged into the water, so it hasn't cooked. And then when they've cast them out and they've wound in the morning, there's a hole and the paste is washed away out the top of the boilie. And if you're using it as a balanced bait, that bit of paste you've taken that's washed out of the bait is negated, and then your boilie will rise up off the bottom because it hasn't got the weight to it anymore. So it's very important that you make sure that the boilie's the cork ball's in the centre of the boilie, as much as in the centre as you can get it anyway. Right, so there we're finished with a table full of round boilies. Just giving them a final coating on the table just to make them perfect. And all I do is hand pick each individual boilie off of the table and I put it into a plastic bowl. And then I give it a little tiny bit of base mix over the top. All that does is stops your boilies from sticking together. So when you boil them, they boil individually and they don't all, get 2 or 3 boilies stuck together. You don't want any dead spots like what I was talking to you about before. You want each of your boilies to be perfectly boiled all the way around. But yeah, anyway, we take them all off the table, put them into a bowl, and now they're ready for boiling. Right, you get a pan of water, make sure it's properly boiling, ferociously boiling. You don't want it just simmering down, you need it to be boiling properly. And all I do is, while I use a plastic tub, I can bend it in half, and we'll put them in. Give it a stir. I'd use that pan just for a lid. Perfectly boiling now. And the reason I keep turning the baits over is, like I was saying before, you don't want any dead spots on the bait where they've got the buoyant part of the bait sits at the top. So you want to just keep turning them over. I'm going to boil these for about 60 seconds. Don't forget, you've only got a 2mm skin around your cork ball, so it doesn't take long to go off at all. And every now and again you'll get a cork ball blow, have a bit of air in it, and it'll boil up and you'll get a boilie with like a little lump sticking out the side, but don't worry too much because after it dries out that will just disappear anyway. And they've been boiled. strainer, pour the water off, and there you have it. Right, so now they've been boiled, I need to leave them to cool down for a little while. Once they've gone cool enough, I'll put them into an air dry bag and I'll leave them sort of 24 to 48 hours before I put them into a tub, depending on the air temperature and the moisture in the air and everything else. This time of year when it's warm, I can normally only get away with 24 hours, but just to cure them off, I like them to go firm, but I don't like to completely desiccate my boilies. What happens is if you get them to go too dry, as soon as you put them in water, they suck on a lot of moisture, they'll just suck the lake in. What happens then, if you're using it as a balance bait, it'll just take on too much water and it won't be balanced anymore. So I just find them you want them to be a moist boilie, but you need them to be hard enough to be able to put a bit of floss around it and tie it up. At the moment, it's just come out the boiler, it's firm, but if I was to tie a piece of dental floss around that and pull it tight, I would cut it in half. Within 24 to 48 hours, I'll do the same thing and it'd be nice and firm. Perfectly round boilie, ready to be chucked out into a lake and hopefully catch you a fish.